Okay. All right. There we go. So there's an elephant in the room and no one wants to talk about it, right? There's this history that we have in America that none of us, no matter how much you attempt to get about it and move forward, like we've been told so many times, the instigations or the agitations of our history continue to plague us. There are events that happen as we're all trying to ignore the realities. There are events that happen that are a constant reminder to the fact that America has not healed the pathology of disease from its origin, and its origin being in slavery. Slavery that built the country to where it is today, the strongest country in the world. And so there are things that happen in America that that are reminders that many have tried not to even look at. The problem is that just like disease, when you try to ignore something in your body that's bothering you, there's always an agitation or a reminder, a pain, a tug, a pull, whatever it is that reminds you that something is not quite right. There is illness or there is a dis-ease that is happening within the body that if it is not addressed, if it is not diagnosed and healed and taken care of, that it can metastasize and turn into something that no longer can be healed and no longer has a remedy. America is ignoring the agitations that are happening within its own pathology and anatomy. And because of that, there is a division within America that will never be healed until and unless it is addressed properly. The only problem is that being that this has gone on for so long within America's pathology and anatomy, it becomes almost impossible to find the remedy to fix it. As many people put their minds together to try to come up with solutions to fix the problem, there is an impossibility in doing so. And that is because it has been so long. The trauma has been allowed to be a part of the anatomy of America for too long. And so how do you fix something that has metastasized? That is the question. And that is the impossibility that we don't seem to have an answer to. What many Black Americans know, especially even me myself, is that something has to be done and something has never been done. And so there's a call for justice. In the universe has a system of cause and effect. There is an equalizing of or a balance that must be instituted whenever one side becomes heavier than the other. You always need the balance in order to create harmony. And so we understand this when we look around and we see so many people who no longer speak to each other. Families are estranged now. You have friends that are no longer friends, your coworkers, or you're not even sitting down to have lunch with your coworkers because this time period has been so elevated that there is no way that anyone can ignore the elephant in the room. And there is no way that you can remain passive in this drama. You will have an opinion. And, before you had an opinion, but you kept it to yourself. But because the universe has agitated this situation to the extent that it has, no one is passive anymore. In the past, you could be neutral, and neutral was okay. Neutral was no position, but today neutral is a position. So even if you have no opinion, that is an opinion, and that affects the outcome of this healing that is supposed to take place. Whether you are contributing to the healing or you are allowing it to remain stagnant and stuck within the pathology and the anatomy of America is how you will have to answer the call on your own personal end, in your own city, in your own state, in this entire country. Everyone individually is being called to have a position, and collectively as a country, we are all being called to have a position. We have a lot of people that are actually running for president that are speaking a language that was never allowed to be spoken. I mean, when have you ever heard anyone speaking about reparations? When have you ever heard candidates even putting that out into the ether that they are for reparations, or even not being afraid to have a conversation? I remember in the past when it was brought up, people would get so silent because no one wanted to talk about it. And now everyone's talking about it. And you have a lot of Black Americans that are like, we're not giving our support to candidate if you do not heal this trauma that America has covered up for so long. You see, you can forget that there was trauma, that there was this evil beginning of America. But as Black Americans, we can't forget. It's part of our DNA. We feel it within our bloodstream. We are the trauma. We live the trauma every day, even if you try to ignore it. Even if America lives in an illusion that things are better, it's not. And so all of these things are happening at this point in order to agitate the pathology that we have now anesthetized and tried to quiet down and not listen to. This is why everything's going crazy. Everything's chaotic. You will have a position, and it's time to look at the elephant in the room, now examine it, and find a way, if it is peaceful, to come up with a solution. As an astrologer, many astrologers, we see through the eyes of ages and times, and we do realize that what happened before happens again. Time is cyclical, and therefore astrology gives us an ability to possibly even predict the future, to see what can happen in the future based on past events. And depending on what was the energy, what was the signature and pattern at a specific time, it tells us what the signature and the pattern can be in the future. In astrology, we not only take into consideration the planets that are in the sky, but we also take into consideration the comets and the fixed stars, the dwarfs. All of those things play a role in the energy that is beamed down to the planet that will create a response in the human anatomy, and then human beings begin to act it out. And this is why no matter what, if you try to ignore some of the energies that are pushing you or urging you to be responsive, no matter what you do, inevitably you will be responding. So this is the time that we're living in. It's very, very complex. So one of the main things that many astrologers will look at, and I very heavily look at it, especially when I am doing an individual's natal chart, I'm able to learn a lot about the pain that their soul has incarnated in. And that particular, what they call a comet now, it keeps changing the type of anatomy that it is in the sky. So right now, let's call it a comet. It is called Chiron. Chiron is an energy that reminds us of what pains us, what ails us, what we came into this life with a painful memory, soul memory of, a painful realization that we cannot exactly put our finger on it until it is triggered. This Chiron specifically, when it deals with people individually, depending on the astrological sign that it's in, will indicate to the astrologer exactly what is hurting this individual, what is the wound that they deal with. And specifically, this Chiron energy is we call it the wounded healer. That's what they called it. And what that means is that where you are wounded, you become the healer. And it is something that you never completely heal from. But because you've had the energy, the education and the pain of it, now you can look out into your world and see what that is. You can identify it. And then you can also assist those who are dealing with the same trauma so that they can heal. So you are wounded in it. You will always be wounded in it, but you will also be able to heal other people that are dealing with it. And that's the practicality of astrology, is that not only are you dealing with a specific makeup, but you can also not only, you can revolutionize it, and you can also turn it around. It's like alchemy. You can use what you're weak in and become strong in it, or you can use what you are weak in and help others to be strong in it. And so specifically this Chiron, I feel, and I believe as an astrologer, I believe that with Black Americans, our Chiron happened to wound, it happened to be in our area of the leader, the pioneer, the courageous fighter who fights and triumphs without any regard for fear. It is the leader who moves into areas that they've never ever experienced before, but they're not afraid to go there. They're not afraid to speak up for themselves and exert themselves, even in the face of death, even in the face of chastisement, or completely being put out there in completely being undermined. They're not afraid of being undermined. This energy is not afraid to be undermined. This energy cannot be arrested. This energy cannot be minimalized, but this energy takes its place in a position of power and in a position of stability. And it's so strong that once it's ignited, everything else behind it, everyone else falls in line and begins to use the energy of that leader in order to create a better existence for themselves. Okay, so keep that in mind. So this energy, Chiron, though, wherever it is, if it is in that specific area that I just mentioned, those attributes, if it is agitating those attributes and undermining those attributes or wounding those attributes, then what it does is it takes away the ability for that person, that group, to now exert themselves, exert themselves and take their rightful position to where they belong. Now, this isn't saying that they lead they lead everything, because everyone, every group, every person, every country has the same concepts or aspects within their own natal nativity. But specifically African Americans, as an astrologer, I see that they are wounded in their self-assertion, their self-confidence, and in who they are. And of course, we know the root of that is slavery in America. And so America has done its job in taking away that power. But that power, taking away that power, does not say that that power doesn't exist. What it says is that that power was undermined by a trauma that is a lie, or a trauma that is attempting to undermine the true strengths and the true power of this group. So specifically Chiron that we're speaking of right now, this Chiron for America is in this area, and not for America, but also for America. So I'll talk on that as well. So for Black Americans, having Chiron in the area of self-assertion, Aries is the leader, right? It is the one that is courageous. It is a pioneer. It is not afraid. It has strong self-esteem about itself. It is willing to fight, and not physically, because you can win a war with your mind. So it is willing to fight for itself and those that need them. Aries will even fight for the underdog. And so, Aries, having been wounded in the area of Black Americans, means that whenever this occurrence happens again, it'll agitate in them a need to remember this pain and finally address it. And so this Chiron happens to go around the Zodiac every 50 years. And it visits the different houses. So it visits different signs. And at this time period that we're living in right now, it's egressing into the sign of Aries. And Aries, which is the leader. America, on the nativity chart of America, funny thing, it has its Chiron in the sign of the leader, Aries, the same as what I am saying. And I've never heard anyone say this before. You heard it here. The same sign as Black Americans. And so America is wounded in this area because the institution of America, the country of America, began with the history of this wound. And so what you are wounded in, you will never, ever be able to anesthetize or cover it up because it'll always be agitated, especially every 50 years. Okay? And so America, having its Chiron or its wound in the sign of Aries, is tantamount to the fact that I've realized that Black Americans also have their Chiron in the sign of Aries. This is huge, guys. If you're an astrologer, you know how powerful this information is, okay? And so having this wound in the sign of Aries for America shows that their use of Aries, their use of the leader, the strength, the assertion, being ruled by the planet Mars, was in error or was used on the shadow side, which is the wrong way, because it used the strength of Aries leadership, the courage and assertion of America's leadership, the power of America's leadership in a belligerent, demeaning, hurtful, brutalizing way. It used it improperly. And so because it used it improperly, America every 50 years will be reminded of its misuse of the Aries energy. And no matter how much they have said, get over it, we will not apologize, no reparations, no healing to the Black Americans, even their descendants, because they have decided to use their Aries energy that way to brutalize and victimize rather than to heal. Every 50 years, they will be reminded of their iniquity. Okay? And so because of this, America will never be what it has always promised to be. The promise was that anyone that is here will be allowed to thrive in equality and build up a life for themselves that will be one of dignity, one of fairness, and one of equality and not disparity. But because we know the history of America, we know that those were just words. They were never true. They may be true for some, but they have not been true for our experience. And no matter how much they have rectified certain situations, the Chiron or the wound of America is intrinsic within their conception. It is intrinsic within the anatomy of America. It is systemic. Every law, every evil done against Black Americans was done not only by individuals, but it was done by the very institutions or the power structures that holds America up. And this is why I did in a video before that from the year of 2020 through 2026, America will be experiencing a very tumultuous time. All around the world will experience it, but specifically America will experience those times because there is no way that you can wound and there's no way that you can perpetrate evil systemically through your structure, your government, your law, all of those education. There's no way that you can allow those illnesses to be in the fabric and the DNA of those structures and not expect for those to crumble. or not expect for the karma of those initiations to the beginning of that evil not to be revisited again within the history or the mundane charts of American history. Astrologically, we know that the cycles always come back again. And when they do, if we learn from the past, then we can heal the future. And because America never healed the past, every 50 years, it had to experience something else that reminded them of the history that they were told to get over, or told the people who suffered to get over. This is huge, okay? So if we go 50 years back right now, what year do we end up in? We end up in the year of 1968. What happened in 1968 in America to Black people, to America? Martin Luther King was shot, right? And right after that, we dealt with the civil rights era. We dealt with the segregation laws all being disrupted. It was like America had to reinvent or rewrite or set amendments to laws that had already been written when the country was instigated or began. And now these had to be rewritten or restructured in order to bring fairness and justice and equity to a group of people that from the very beginning it had traumatized and systemically oppressed. And so we got the civil rights laws and all of those laws that came up in the 60s. My people were rioting in the streets, fighting. We developed at that time, because Martin Luther King died and because there were so many injustices, Jim Crow, and all of those things that were never rectified from the Emancipation Proclamation. Our people in the 60s, they were agitated by the planetary energies that made them begin to be reminded of their past. They were being reminded of the fact that they never healed, and they were being reminded of the fact that they were promised fairness once slavery ended, but they never got it. And so because this agitation was happening from the planets, now these people our people were gaining courage. We were angry. We were so upset. And we used the Chiron of Aries in the wise way, because Aries rules the head. And we figured out a way to wisely bring about change. But we used courage because we were like, you're not going to take advantage of us. We want justice. And so we took to the streets. We used our pocketbooks to bring change. And that was in 1968. No matter how much we try not to remember the pain, or we cover it up, or America covers it up, the planets will instigate and agitate that wound. It's like, imagine having a cut and you just keep rubbing against the cut and it hurts so badly. Well, every 50 years, that cut that America inflicted upon the African Americans is being re-agitated. It's bleeding again. And if America just throws and slaps a Band-Aid on it, then in 50 years from now, it could be a lot worse. Now, if we go back 50 years from there, we're going to end up, if we keep going back 60 years, we end up in like 1868. Like the more we keep going back, 1868, what happened then? The Emancipation Proclamation, right? And then we keep going back and we keep going back. And guess where we end up? We end up in the year of 1618. I'm not lying. So when we end up in that year, what happened in that year? If you know the history of slavery, you know that this is the year that Blacks were bought from Africa in the transatlantic slave trade to America as slaves. There was more before that, but officially the date is 1619. Now, remember I had spoken about the year 2020 through 2026 being the year of years of reckoning for both America and the world. Well, now here we are facing these issues, okay? And so now we have to also look at the fact that not only was 1619 an issue, but if you count 1619 to 2019, you get 400 years, okay? And so that's a factor to understand. And this is not biblical, okay? This has nothing to do with the Bible. The Bible is just a way to use astrology and also a distraction so that people don't really understand what is being conveyed and the messages that are actually coming from the cosmos. The planets are agitating these events within our time period. So 1619 up to now, we get up to 1968. There's a revolution in America with Black Americans. We're now fighting for ourselves. We are now asserting the Aries energy that is supposed to be the leader, the fighter. We are using it in the right way instead of using it in the wrong way, like America, whose Chiron is in Aries, where they bullied people. Right? They were evil to people. They oppressed people. African Americans in 1968 used it in the proper way in the 1960s, and they were able to fight the right way for justice. And so they became the teacher to the world, because look how powerful that message was. But the message in 1968 was not strong enough. The job wasn't finished. It wasn't done. We've been told that, look, you got your civil rights, be happy. America has healed from its evil past, but we know that that's not true. The job wasn't finished. We still are facing the repercussions of slavery even today. Just our beautiful color is a stigmatism and a reminder, because even if we try to get the American dream and get an education and do all those things, many Black Americans that have all of the titles, they're finding that they still aren't good enough for the American dream, right? And we know within ourselves how powerful and wonderful we are. But the world, the way we've been treated outside of this body is apropos for our history, okay? Our history is repeated over and over again every time we step outside our door, no matter what we do, right? You could play the game, you could do everything, but you're still a product of that past. You can never take the past and erase it. It always comes forward into the future. So 1968, we used our energy properly, but America did not. So now we have the two dynamics of how Aries energy can be used. It can be used for positivity, or it can be used incorrectly, the way that America did, right? And so if we count 50 years forward from 1968, what year do we come to? We come to 2019, 2020. And remember, I spoke about 2020 through 2026. Astrologically, the events that are going on with the planets are going to be so powerful that just as we are not able to ignore anymore our history in America, we will really not be able to ignore it. There will be no way that you can put your head in the sand. There will be no way that people can say, get over it. There will be no way that people will not be participatory in this new change. America will be forced to face its Chiron in Aries. It will be forced to look at its past, and it will be forced to pay up. It will be forced to reconcile and atone for what it has done. If you think about the way that it was done in the 60s, think about it even on a grander scale here in this time period that we're living in. Chiron, going back into the sign of Aries, is a powerful revelation that we have already begun to feel within the last couple of years. You turn on the news, you will see Chiron and Aries, and it should remind you, especially after this video, that America has its Chiron return, and so does Black America. America has its Chiron and Aries, and so does Black America. And so every time this happens, every 50 years, be reminded that we will be reminded of the past in order to heal in the future. Because where America is wounded, which is Black Americans, we are the Achilles heel of America. No matter how much America speaks of its greatness, because we are here, we are a symbol. We are a reminder that it is not, until it atones for what it has done, until it fully offers the complete therapy of the trauma that was inflicted on our bloodline. And if you are a white American and you are watching this video, you can play a part in this role. You can assert the Aries energy in the negative way, or you can assert the energy in a positive way, because whether you like it or not, we are here to heal. And if we are not healing our wounds in the proper way, then America will continue to metastasize its evil and its pain and its trauma, and we will never be the greatest country in the world. You will never be the greatest people in the world as long as this evil is pushed away and not addressed. And so you can play your part and your role in the healing of America by having fairness and equity in everything that you do. If you see someone suffering, it should not matter that they are not you. You should see what is right and what is wrong and fight for what is right. See, this will be a fight for America, for the country and the continent that you step your feet on. It'll be a fight that is greater than each individual. It'll be calling for the higher purpose and the calling of humanity. For Chiron and Aries is something that we are all born to address. And because we are on the planet exactly at this specific time, 50 years after 1968, that means that each of us plays a role in this healing. We can learn from the past, but we can ignore the past. But Chiron and Aries will always agitate the Achilles heel of America. And that is Black Americans. That is our experience. Can we heal? Can we make it better? Can we be fair in the distribution of equity and reparations and repairing and atoning? If not, the return of Chiron and Aries will be worse than anyone can imagine. I hope this taught you guys something. You will not hear this from anyone else. And it's very huge. It's even bigger than this conversation that I've had with you guys today. I wish that I could develop it more for you. I hope I made some kind of sense. I will be speaking on this topic again very shortly. I will also be doing the chart of America and showing you the different personality types of America and why it is the way that it is. Also, the fact that 2020 through 2026, we'll see some tremendous changes here in America. It might not be the same America that you recognize from before, and all is not biblical. Remember, the Bible is a book that is based on the sun. And this is why the Bible is called Helios Biblios. Okay, Helios means sun. So it's Biblios is a book, the book of the sun. And so whenever there are prophecies or anything that is written, it is written on the cycles of the astrological alignments that are in the sky. And this is why it's so tantamount that people start to understand and appreciate the knowledge and the wisdom and the insight that astrology can bring you. Astrology has changed my life. I pass that on to my son. I hope he passes it on to his family. And if you're interested in learning astrology, if you want to know where you are wounded and where you can now apply the healing balm to yourself and those who are suffering from the same wounds that you are, then I think you should start to either learn astrology or get your chart read. America is in for its time period, its reckoning, and it's all within the chart of the birth of America and in the chart in the birth of slavery that was instigated here in America as the first wound or the first evil that America began with. Okay, so take care, guys. You can reach out to me. I have my email. I'll have it written in the info box. You can reach out to me for a natal chart reading, and I'm also teaching astrology. So if you want to learn astrology, you can contact me and we'll set something up, okay? I'll be back live this week, okay? My birthday's coming up, Aries. Bye.